Hello and welcome to another live presentation here on YouTube on my channel, Luis Borrero, Visual Artist. Thank you for everyone that's coming by today. Today I have a really exciting presentation. I'm going to be talking about narrative painting, and I'm going to be sharing some of my process and some of my paintings in the context of narrative painting. For those of you that are coming by every week and are leaving the comments and are subscribing to the channel, I want to thank you for being here once again. For those of you that are visiting for the first time, please subscribe and share the content. So today I'm going to be talking about a wonderful subject that is narrative painting. For the past 20 years, I've been practicing narrative painting in my own work, and I'm a big fan of narrative painting throughout history. As you all know, I'm always sharing some amazing works of art here on the channel from the old masters. So a lot of you that are coming by probably do not know much about who I am. And today I would just want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about my work, about my influences, about my education as an artist. So let's just go ahead and get started. I just want to talk about my education. First of all, I was educated at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, great institution in Philadelphia with over 200 years of history. And during my third year at the Academy, I was awarded a travel scholarship to travel in Spain, and mostly in Spain and Italy. And this trip was very influential. The Academy has had this prize for the last 200 years. Academy was established in 1805, and this scholarship, called the Crescent Scholarship, is a wonderful opportunity for artists to travel all over Europe seeking inspiration and learning new techniques. And I was the recipient of this scholarship in 1997, and during those travels I was able to learn a great deal about classical painting, and it really changed my style. It was a transformative experience for me, and this is the sketchbook that I recorded during those travels, and I would like to share some of those drawings with you. The reason that this sketchbook is so important is because it really shaped my style as an artist. During my travels, I went to Madrid, I was in Seville, southern Italy, central Italy. And these experiences were fundamental to my development as an artist and learning a lot of these techniques. And so I spent 2 months in Europe copying some of the great works from Van Dyck to Caravaggio, Velázquez, all the great painters. And I learned a great deal. It was fundamental to my development. And one of the things that I developed when I was traveling was the idea of a composition and really learning to analyze compositions. And these are some early sketches from my travels, and I'm sharing these with you because this is a process that I'm still engaged in this process very much. So for most of my works, I'm always doing this thumbnails, and these are really important for my process as an artist. And these are drawings that were done throughout history by artists in preparation for the ideas of painting and of subject matter. So that's why I'm sharing this information with a lot of you that are probably starting out with your careers. And these drawings are just meant to be very quick, very loose. They're called thumbnail drawings, and as you can see, I've jotted down notes, and I've started with perhaps just a very simple idea and just added more elements. And these are some of the earliest drawings that I have from paintings that I ended up exhibiting at the Pennsylvania Academy, and I conceived of these paintings during my travels. I did a lot of drawings, a lot of copies from the old masters, paintings such as this portrait of study by Van Dyck. Also a lot of compositional drawings that would later help me sort of develop my own style. These are drawings from Velázquez. Los Borrachos, a wonderful painting in the Prado Museum. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this process of copying was just learning just the possibilities of composition, you know. And I just want to show you some drawings here from some compositions that I copied from Titian. And these are early on. These are drawings from Santa Maria de Frari in Venice. And early on, I was just really interested in how the old masters were using pattern and movement to move the eye around and to create these amazing narratives. And this was very influential to my work, because by the time that I get back to the United States, I started creating my own paintings, and in my style shifted to a more classical style. Very much interested in chiaroscuro. This is a painting by Titian, early Titian, and this is, you know, very fundamental to the development of any artist. And today I still use this process when working on my own compositions. And I want to share with you some images from old master paintings that really shaped my vision as an artist. The first one is from this wonderful book from Velázquez. This is a wonderful book published by the Prado Museum. It's called Velázquez, Técnica en Evolución. It's probably the most complete book on Velázquez, and it has x-rays of Velázquez paintings, his working methods. I believe it's out of print, but a painting that has been very influential to my work is this beautiful painting by Velázquez, Las Meninas. It's a world-famous painting. And early on, I started studying a lot of Velázquez methods of how to dissect the space with the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, and also the use of light. And I'm sharing this painting because it was very influential to my development of my interiors. I paint a lot of interiors. I love painting the interior because you could control the light, very much like Velázquez has here, where he's controlling the light. In this case, it's coming from right to left. Usually the earlier painters used the light from left to right. But Velázquez uses a very important ploy here, and it's that he uses light in the foreground, excuse me, and also in the background, in the very background. So he's really moving the eye not only with movement and with pattern, but also he's creating a different dimension with light. So meaning this is one plane of light, and then way back here, there's another plane of light way back there. And this figure sort of becomes silhouetted. And that really was influential to my work. And I started adopting that in my own paintings. I want to show you another painting that was very influential in my development. Another great painter that I absolutely love is Rembrandt. And this is a wonderful book. Years ago, the Philadelphia Museum of Art held this wonderful exhibition, Rembrandt and the Face of Jesus. And in this exhibition, they had some of Rembrandt's most accomplished paintings, or narrative paintings, religious narrative paintings. And they has a painting in particular from I believe this is one of his I guess categorized as studio of Rembrandt. So it's not a painting by Rembrandt, but one of his students. And this painting was just very influential to my work. Wonderful painting. Here the painter's using light once again in the middle ground, and the foreground is fully in darkness, in silhouette, which is a ploy from Baroque narrative painting that I love, and I adapted it in my own work. The foreground sort of becomes this just mass of dark, and then the image of the figures is bathed in light in the middle ground. And Rembrandt continues this trend in his later paintings, and I'm going to share with you this amazing work by Rembrandt that I absolutely love. This is the Supper at Emmaus, a wonderful painting. And here you can see where Rembrandt uses the ploy of a silhouette to narrate this very famous scene when Jesus is a visit by Jesus, and this image is completely in silhouette and the light is behind, therefore propelling us to go into this composition. And then he has the foreground, the middle ground, and then back here he goes back to light on the back. He goes back to a silhouette and then light again behind. And this is something that was highly influential to my work, and I love this scheme of light and just how there's a lot of geometry involved. And this is something that I've used in my own paintings, and I essentially learned it from Rembrandt and from Velázquez, from a lot of 17th century painters. So I want to just show you some of my paintings, and let's just go ahead and take a look at one of my compositions that I painted probably around 2011, and this is a commission that I did for a client, and I started with a very simple idea and a sketch, and this is a sketch that I did using the technique of the carta azzurra that I've shown you here in the channel before, an old technique used by Leonardo da Vinci and a lot of Renaissance artists. And this is pen and ink. It has ink wash, white lead touches, and also some charcoal. And this is the type of sketch. This is already a working drawing. It's not really a thumbnail drawing. It's already a developed idea. The painting started with just a very schematic thumbnail, which I do not have, but I moved on to a working sketch such as this one, and using a model and some photography and just being very schematic. And from there I developed the idea, and in this case the painting is called Reincarnaciones, or Reincarnation, which is it has a very interesting background. The client wanted a portrait of her dog, and I usually don't do portraits of dogs. I'm mostly a narrative painter, a portrait painter. So I told her, yes, I will do a portrait of your dog, but in the context of you and how your relationship with the dog. And the client agreed to pose for the portrait or for the composition. And I visited her space, and when I went to her wonderful apartment, she had this beautiful construction panel from India that had all these monkeys in the background, and I used that in the final composition, and the painting ended up being this sort of mix of elements. Although it's not a definitive composition or narrative, excuse me, the painting ended up having some really interesting elements. So let's just take a look at the final painting, and I want to share this final painting with you guys. And here's the final painting, and there you can see how I'm using two light sources on either side of the composition, and I'm using the ploy of Baroque painters where you're using the light in the middle ground or in the background, not in the foreground. So the dog becomes, in the sketch, you could see, if we could get the sketch back up, you'll be able to see the change. I changed the position of the dog, and initially the dog was, I guess, smelling her arm or licking her arm, and I felt that that was not powerful enough. So I changed the position of the dog to sort of create a stronger diagonal, a stronger presence, more of a sort of a characterization of the dog, because I felt that it was necessary for the composition. So there you see the change, and that's one of the reasons that working sketches are so important, because when you're working with an idea, you have a basic idea, and sometimes the work will require a change that is fundamental, and you won't really be able to see that. Even from a sketch, you will start off with just a basic idea. You have a client that perhaps has an idea of what they want, but you as the artist also will have an idea of what you want to represent. And in the case of painting, well, it's important to, yes, favor the client, but also be honest to yourself and work out in the painting that your own narrative, what you want to say. It's important that you see that in great works of art, and something that I've strived to do with my own work. Even in commission works, I strive to create a sense of narrative, of interest. I submitted this painting years ago for the Salmagundi Club in New York, and it won a prize. I'm very proud of that. It's really interesting, ended up being an interesting painting. And one of the comments a lot of other artists that saw the work and when it was exhibited, they really enjoyed the characterization of the dog almost as a figure, as a human being. And that just was almost accidental. It was almost an instinctual decision that happened at the end of the painting. And I'd never really planned it that way. As long as, you see that early on, I wanted to create that strong diagonal from one corner to the other, so that's why I placed the dog. But in the end, the characterization of the dog was really important to the development of the narrative. So I ended up sort of sacrificing the flow of the composition to sort of favor the diagonal that was created between her eyes and the dog's eyes. So it's just an example of how composition could be interpreted, and how important it is to be aware of these very, very subtle things in when you're sort of trying to make an arrangement. The Spaniards call this an arreglo, and I'm very obsessive about el arreglo, which is the compositional elements that are reinforcing the overall message of the composition. And these are things that are perhaps, even in the context of my channel, where I talk a lot about materials and a lot about processes of painting and materials and techniques. These are more abstract ideas, but they're just as powerful. And in the creation of a work of art, nothing could be taken for granted. You have to really take into account all these elements. So, and let's just go ahead and move on. And I just want to share with you this a series of paintings that I did. This is my last solo show that I had. It was called Relatos. It was a show based on purely narrative paintings. For years, I've been interested in the idea of narrative painting and how to appropriate the ideas of classical narrative painting into contemporary narrative painting, which is very difficult because the context of a lot of classical paintings is religious, and we now do not paint for the church. So finding a context is really difficult, and this is an issue that a lot of figurative artists are addressing today, finding context for the narrative. And in this last exhibition, I focus on just everyday scenes, very influenced by, there you see the painting that I just showed you, Reincarnaciones. And creating sort of a body of work is difficult, and just creating that contemporary vision and that connection with history is difficult. So that's something that I've been trying to do in my own work. I'm very much interested in the interior space. It has a wonderful potential to be expressive, and when even painted by itself, just the idea of geometry and light, just those two elements of geometry and light could be very powerful. And in this painting in particular, Interior Vacío from 2015, I strive to do that, devoid the painting of all the figurative elements, and just really hint at the figurative elements without the figure, which is difficult to do when you see that in a lot of 17th century Dutch genre painting, which has been very influential to my work. I'm very studious of light as a protagonist in my paintings, and that's something that I've worked for years in developing. Just the idea of narrating with light. For example, in this painting, I have a foreground light, a middle light, and then a background light. So the light is being represented in all three spaces. It's something that I've worked very hard in developing in my work, and this series was consistent in that vision. Another narrative painting, a self-portrait, and using the foreground again with the darkness, the silhouetted. Although there is no element in the foreground that is silhouetted, I'm using the light in the middle ground and in the background, very shallow space. So again, elements that sort of tie together the narrative, and it's essentially, well, you probably could ask, what is the narrative? Well, it's really based on the idea of light and the action of these figures in their respective spaces. We are sort of invited to go in and explore that space, and it's almost like a voyeuristic experience that I've enjoyed in Vermeer's paintings. A couple weeks ago, I shared with you the idea of the camera obscura, and I mentioned how influential the camera obscura was. And this is something that I've studied very closely with the images of Vermeer and a lot of other 17th century artists that have used the camera obscura. So just the idea, we are sort of detached from this. We're sort of walking into this person in this intimate space, and we shouldn't really be there, but we are, and that sort of becomes in itself a sort of narrative, and we're sort of invited to go in, but we're also supposed to feel like strangers in that space. So that's something that I've been working very very closely with for the last 20 years. I want to show you some other another painting. Let's see, one last painting before we see the last image that I want to share with you guys. Another narrative painting using my daughter in another space that is very compressed, and you're invited to sort of look around and see all these elements and go around this space. About 15 years ago, I started painting interiors. I started working with the human figure and with the nude figure, but then I switched to interiors because it's almost like a stage set, and you see that in Vermeer's paintings. And let me just share with you a painting that has been influential, and I think I showed you this book before, wonderful book called Vermeer Studies. Vermeer has been influential in my work because of his use of light and different spaces, everyday genre scenes. This is a beautiful painting by Vermeer. Okay, lady writing a letter with her maid. Wonderful painting from 1672. And in this painting, we have a wonderful sense of space. Vermeer was very much interested in the geometry of these spaces, and one of the things that he does, even here, and I have adapted that in my own work. You have a silhouette right here that separates the foreground. You have middle ground light and then background light. Okay, so the light, you're not only narrating with this element of silhouette, with the element of geometry, but also pattern, but also the idea of light going back in that space. And it's an element that I've used in my work continuously, for the past 20 years, and it's something that a lot of painters perhaps are not interested in nowadays. We're very focused on perhaps the developments of Renaissance art, where it's more about form and anatomy and the figure and a very centralized figure. But for the 17th century painter, the idea of composition was really important. We have also photography. We take for granted this arrangement. Nowadays, with just a simple camera, you could just compose any scene in a matter of seconds. This would have taken Vermeer months or even years to compose. So that's something that cannot be taken for granted, and it's just beautifully composed. I mean, the arrangement here is just wonderful. I just want to share another painting. Even this, let's see. Even these these are small images, but even here you could see just the geometry, the diagonal, and even as abstract elements, these paintings are beautifully beautifully controlled and arranged. I mean, look at this beautiful square and how that figure is just sort of pinned between us and that background shape, and then that shape is sort of echoed all throughout this composition. So those are the things that I really look for when I look at a great composition, and something that I want to share with you here in the channel. Just be aware when you're composing. Just be aware of the geometry, and even this. I always tell my students, and I'll pass this one along, which is probably a lot of you do not think about this, but even the outside shape of your composition really has a psychology or a narrative to describe. So Vermeer, by using the square versus a rectangle, a square is very passive, very solid, very well, hence the term, you're square, you're not a very exciting person, very still. And he uses the square as a powerful tool in narrating. So here he has a beautiful square, and then he breaks up the monotony of that square with a rectangle. And that is just genius. If he was to put a square here, then it would be too static. It would be a square versus a square. So he has a square versus a rectangle. And he's very much aware of the psychology of this outside shape. So, and I want to talk about that in my next image that I want to share with you. And again, the square has been very influential in my own work. Velázquez chooses a beautiful square in his painting of Las Meninas. And when I started studying composition, I started looking outside more than inside, believe it or not, because this shape is so important. I aspired to be a comic book artist, and I learned that from comic books, where when you're narrating and organizing the page, you either use a very long rectangle to expedite the narration, or a square to slow it down, or even a diagonal to speed it up into the next page. So that's something that I learned early on as I was working with comic books, and you see that being used and utilized by the old masters when choosing their outside shape to establish their composition. Very important. If you're wanting to narrate, just take into account how the outside shape is going to affect the narrative in the inside. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the last image that I have for you guys today. So this is the painting that I'm going to be sharing, and this is one of my own narratives. And this painting started out as a quick sketch, and I have there you can see the sketch in the large format. Here's the original sketch, and this is how I begin. This is the genesis of this painting here. The painting is called Boda. It's a painting that, let me just go ahead and put it here so you can see that. And I'm going to show you a final probably has a lot of glare. Okay, there we go. And this painting started as a one of the things that obviously I've just told you about, studying the square format of the composition. And for a long time, I was very much interested in Spanish literature. And I became very interested in some of the plays from the 17th century, the La Barca, and other great composers, authors from Spain. And something wonderful that happens in Spanish literature is their characterization of some of the characters in the play, and their situations and their interactions. And Las Meninas is one of those genre paintings that are considered puzzle pictures, and I became very obsessive with the idea of puzzle pictures, and even Vermeer's paintings are sort of puzzle pictures. Their narrative is enigmatic. It's not definitive. They're genre scenes, but they could be much more. They're metaphorical, and that's something that I wanted to do for a long time, create these sort of enigmatic narratives. And I set out to paint my first sort of mysterious narrative with the open-ended metaphorical context. And I came up with this painting, Boda, and it started as a sketch. Here you see in the left-hand side, very quick sketch, and these images sort of, the way that I work is I just start with a thumbnail, very quick thumbnail, as you can see there on the screen. And this is strictly from my imagination. I won't really be concerned with hiring models or setting up models or anything like that. So what I'll do is I'll just start with a very, very quick sketch from my imagination, and I just conceive of this sketch in terms of light and shade and arrangement. And from there, I'll move on to a working drawing. But in this case, I moved on from the sketch, and I immediately hired some models, and I set up a live session, and I developed an oil sketch, which I'm going to share now with you guys. The oil sketch, this is an oil sketch. What is an oil sketch? Well, essentially, it's a very quick painting. The models pose for probably 25 minutes, probably 20 minutes each, and I just asked them to move around, and I worked with 3 models, and I repeated 2 of the models, and directly from life, and I just asked them to move, and I'll just overlap the models, and it's very schematic, very quick. I'm not interested in any detail, and from there, from the working sketch, the drawing, and photography as well, I will develop the last final version. And the final version is here. That is the final version. Okay, and you can see there the elements of and I want to talk very quickly about the metaphorical elements of this painting. You have a wedding scene that has no groom. There's a self-portrait element as well, and the figure in the foreground, I've used the silhouette element that I describe in Rembrandt's painting and in Velázquez. The light is traveling behind that frontal figure, and the whole foreground becomes silhouetted. A wonderful effect, because immediately gives you space. You immediately start getting the sense of space. The light is traveling from up here and it's moving across, entering, and it's behind the figure. So you have an immediate sense of space because the figure is in the front, silhouetted, and the light is in the middle ground and in the background. So I was able to create a lot of space, in a lot of sense of space and order. And another thing is that I use the sense of order by using the square format. Usually I'll compose in a rectangle, but in this case it's the first time that I use a square, and it was a wonderful experiment, just a wonderful way to see how the old masters still have a lot of knowledge to provide us, and just by studying those, in this case I'm sort of just promoting the study of geometry in old works and the idea of light in space. So wonderful solutions that the old masters used, and I continue to explore these themes and these elements in my own work. I just wanted to talk about these elements as part of your sort of evolution for those of you that are learning to paint and are interested in narrative painting. These are things to consider. So, and I'm going to keep it short today. I realize that a lot of us have busy lives. But before I go, I want to tell you about something really exciting. I'm going to be sharing the link to my new course, the Old Masters Drawing Techniques. I just released the class on Udemy. I'm very proud of the content of the class. I spent 20 years researching a lot of these techniques, and I was able to put them all together in a comprehensive course. The course is now up in the Udemy server. You could find a link in the description in this video. Check it out. For those of you that are interested in silver point, sanguine, or red chalk drawing, tree crayon technique, and quill drawing, I've included all those techniques in one single place in the Udemy server. Wonderful initiative. I'm very proud of it, and I couldn't possibly share a lot of this knowledge here because it's just hours and hours and hours. So now you could get it in one place. So make sure to check that out. Also, I've shared the link for those of you that are getting started with drawing and want to improve your drawing skills and just basic ideas of chiaroscuro, of light and shade. What is the third contour? What is the cast shadow? The mechanics of chiaroscuro lighting. You could check out my classical drawing course also in Udemy. I'm very proud of that course. It has about 500 students, or nearing 500 students. I'm getting a lot of good reviews. So check that out. Wonderful resources. And I'm really, really happy with a lot of the feedback that I've been receiving on the channel. Some amazing questions. And a lot of you are visiting also my Luis Borrero Art page, luisborreroart.com. My Instagram, Luis Borrero Art. And also, for those of you that are interested in perhaps some live classes, you could find out more information here in Atelier San Juan, which is my school. And it's a fully online school now because of the pandemic. So I offer live classes every Monday and every Saturday. So check that out, Luis Borrero Art, or in ateliersanjuan.org. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff. I'm going to be coming back next week with more content. Thank you again for being here. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure to subscribe and share the content. Again, I want to thank everyone for your support and your feedback. Thanks again, and have a great week. I'll see you next week with another live session.